Hello, fellow fantasy sports fans. Welcome to MFSN The Hub's Fantasy Football Waiver Wire Show every Monday at 8:45 p.m. Eastern, 5:45 p.m. Pacific. This is Waiver Wire Week 8, but it's NFL Week 9. And I'm here as always with Kasey, Vlad to the Bone, Scheinbold, and nobody. Just you, Kasey.
Just us. No cowboy stuff today.
No. We'll be the guys who want to be discussing sports with you.
He's
cowboy.
just ducking out on his Kenneth Gainwell.
That's what happened. That's what happened. He was super into Kenneth Gainwell. And look, let's put this in proper perspective. I was the one who talked about him early, and then I saw that not much was happening. Ross got all excited about him when who was it? Who's the starter?
Miles Sanders went IR.
And so naturally, you'd think that's when Gainwell comes in the picture, but it's not going to be the case. We're going to hold off on getting to running backs first because we always do. QBs first. So, Case, I'm going to let you go first because it's going to be either you or me.
That's right. I'll go first this time. How about you go first next time?
Oh, I'll go. Okay, fine. I'll take some responsibility.
So, let's see. Who do we want this week coming up? That's Wait, in the quarterback.
You know what? Hold on. Let's start with that. The operative question, I love the way you phrased it. Who do we want? Because when we looked at this waiver wire list, there's not a ton of strong candidates. It's that time of year where you got to dig deep. But I do actually like, there are some pickups I think, better than you, because when you were talking about it, you made it sound like the entire thing was a bunch of tight ends.
That's true. And that might be a bit of a reach, but I don't think the waiver wire is very strong. But if you're in a strong league by week 9, it shouldn't be that strong of a waiver wire because most people have been claimed. But I'm going to start with Tua. I think Tua Tagovailoa for Miami. He had a rough game against the Bills this past weekend, but he's going up against Houston next week. He's coming off prior to this week. He had 2 300-yard passing games in a row. He was throwing for touchdowns. He actually rushed in for a touchdown this past weekend to salvage what was an otherwise miserable week for him. I think Tua is probably the top quarterback pickup coming into week 9.
I think, for a bye week fill-in, I could certainly see it. I have him as my number 2 pickup overall. I have been talking about Carson Wentz all along as a pretty solid pickup. I think he's getting a really nice rapport with Michael Pittman. If Pittman you can trade for him, he's definitely on the way up. He's over 60% rostered, so you can't pick him up off the wire. But Carson Wentz, meanwhile, is only at 56%. Last week, he was at 37%. This is probably your last chance to scoop him up. I'm not saying he's going to win you leagues, but listen, I've played in leagues before where people started the most insane quarterback. I think somebody won a league starting Spurgon Wynn at one point, if anyone even remembers who that is. It happens, because at that point, it's only 2 teams, and you never know who you're going to need to start. Carson Wentz, I think, is reliable.
I like Carson Wentz, but I've watched I think Indianapolis was the Monday Night Football game 2 weeks ago against San Francisco, where I think he should have thrown 5 interceptions. But as I said a couple weeks ago, San Francisco, for some reason, decided they were going to play as if they had no fingers on their hands or something for catching. And so there were a lot. And then if you watched the game this past weekend against Tennessee, he threw one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen. I think they had 3rd and something from about the 3-yard line. Instead of throwing the ball away, he waited until they had him in the grasp. Then he tried to switch it to his left hand. This is in a tie game in the 4th quarter with 6 minutes left, by the way.
That's terrible.
And tried to throw it out of the end zone left-handed, threw it right to somebody who was blitzing, and they walked into the end zone.
Okay, listen, that's terrible. But you got to remember, fantasy football is different than football. I'm not saying he's the guy I'd want to start for my NFL team, but as a fantasy player, he still put up points overall.
No, he absolutely did. He had 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. It's just a question of trust. And I have him on my list as my second pickup. He's going against the Jets this coming week, I think. So it's not the worst position to be in, although the Jets just made Joe Burrow look human for some reason. So I agree with you. He's a pickup, but he's not he's a bye week fill-in at this point.
This is another reason Ross isn't here, you realize. The Jets beat the Bengals. He was like, I'm going to Vegas. I can't even be here. We know that's what happened. Okay, now let me ask you this. Last thing before we move on from quarterbacks. What's your take on Ryan Fitzpatrick at this point? Is he coming back? If so, when? Is he worth stashing?
Last thing I saw is he was still at least 2 weeks away. That if anything, he'd be back week 11. From what I read, I could be wrong on that. He's certainly worth stashing. I mean, I think is it Heineke? Tyler Heineke, is that his last name?
Yep.
Has played himself out of the fantasy darling role the past few weeks. I think he was a novelty early on because defenses didn't know him well enough. As more and more game tape kind of appeared on this guy, I think they figured him out, and it proved why he was never a starter in the first place. I think he's a great backup. I just don't think he's fantasy relevant. If they get Logan Thomas back, they still have Scary Terry at wide receiver. I think Curtis Samuel should be back at some point. He'll have the weapons to be relevant. I mean, you got JD, is it McKissick is their running back, I think?
That's right.
Who catches balls. So there's options for Fitzpatrick, and he's been shown to be able to throw 3-4 touchdown games with some regularity in his career. So I think, again, he's a stash if you're misfortune to have somebody like, Jameis Winston as your starter. Not that I hope you didn't have Jameis Winston as your starter, but if you did, he's somebody who could certainly put up similar numbers to him. But I wouldn't stash him because I think he's going to carry me to a championship.
No, but listen, if I had an IR spot just sitting around, he's not a bad stash. No, not at all. If your top quarterback gets injured and he's back, you can avoid some major problems. Okay, we're going to go to our sponsor now, Killcliff. Ready? Killcliff CBD, the best tasting CBD drink in the world. Orange Kush, Mango Tango, Strawberry Days, the grapest of all time, and Joe Rogan's Spicy Pineapple, called the Flaming Joe. Founded by a Navy SEAL. For those who aren't Navy SEALs, I still think that's totally unfair for people who are Navy SEALs. It's the biggest no-brainer in the history of drinks. Go to
I think Navy SEALs can drink it too. I'm just going out on a limb saying they would.
I'm a very, very literal reader.
I know that.
At times. I also was an English major, so I understand metaphor and figurative speech. But we're going to get literal again. We're going back to running backs. I'm going to go first. I'm not going to throw it on you every time. This guy is on our cover for a reason. Derrick Henry, the best running back in the game, appears to be done for the year with a broken metatarsal, I believe.
He had surgery on his foot. I'm not exactly sure what for.
Okay. I imagine it was for an injury. They don't usually do surgery just totally electively. So now that means the Titans running back situation is very fluid, but I have had my eye on Jeremy McNichol for a while. If you've been watching the show, I've said he's the kind of guy after Alexander Madison was picked up, after Tony Pollard was drafted. Tony Jones for a while looked like a good pickup.
You had as a big
Chuba Hubbard. These are the guys you got to get. And Jeremy McNichol was next on that list for me. Now he appears to be up next. Now, I will admit, the Titans also just signed old man Adrian Peterson, old purple Jesus. And we will see who ends up starting there. And look, it could be somebody else. In fact, why don't you talk about it? You have some trade targets in mind.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, tomorrow's the trade deadline. I think they have till either 2 p.m. Eastern or 4 p.m. Eastern. I'm not sure exactly what time tomorrow the trade deadline is. But I was going through kind of the list of running backs and the depth of running backs on different teams to see if there was anybody who would be a potential trade target. I think Marlon Mack in Indianapolis would be somebody, if I had room at the end of my bench to do a speculative ad, he would be a target for them. Ronald Jones, I believe, is not very well owned right now. And because he's fallen out of favor because of some fumbling issues early in the season, Leonard Fournette has kind of taken that job and run with it and proven to be a multi-down back. And then they also have Giovanni Bernard there. So Ronald Jones is kind of out of a job. Rashard Penny, maybe in Seattle. I'm not sure how much you could get for him or whether he'd be worth trading for. But I look at players like that and I think maybe Tennessee would rather go with somebody who's in game shape, right? And has played football this year. Adrian Peterson, to quote one of our favorite movies, I wish I had that guy 4 years ago, from Major League. Like Adrian Peterson now is not the Adrian Peterson of his Minnesota Viking days. And so that offense is decimated with the loss of Derrick Henry because Julio Jones hasn't played in forever. And when he hasn't been effective. It's like can AJ Brown play running back too? I don't know. Are they going to try to do that with everything? So those are some trade targets I would consider adding to the end of my bench in the hopes that they get traded.
Okay. Now I'm going to give one more, but I'm not going to steal your thunder. Don't worry. I'm going to let you have your day in the sun for this because you earned it. But Alexander Madison's still sitting at 52%. There are going to be weeks where he doesn't play because Dalvin Cook does, but he is a difference maker in any week that he can play. He goes right in and he basically becomes essentially Dalvin Cook.
And Dalvin Cook has been so disappointing from fantasy perspective this year. He would be one of the – I own him in a league, and it's been one of the most frustrating first-round picks I've made in a while.
I have a feeling you won't be selecting him again anytime soon. So I say Alexander Madison is a very high priority pickup just because he's the kind of guy who can win you individual weeks. He could win you the league. If you get into the playoffs and Dalvin Cook is out, he could win you the league. But now I'm going to give you your day in the sun because Ross isn't here to defend his Kenneth Gainwell pick, which I bear some responsibility for. Also, on this network, we take responsibility for our mistakes. And that's one of the reasons you can trust us much more than other places that are like, oh, I didn't say that. That didn't happen. No, I've been talking up Kenneth Gainwell, and he was completely useless. All right, Case, take it away.
Yeah, I had to own it 2 weeks ago when I recommended Demetric Felton over Ernest Johnson, and that obviously I fell flat on my face on that one. But I did last week, if anybody remembers, say I would much rather have Boston Scott than I would Kenneth Gainwell. And what did Boston Scott go out and do this weekend? 2 touchdowns at 60 yards, put up 18 fantasy points in standard leagues. He's still only 20% owned. There's still no evidence that Miles Sanders, who's been put on the IR, is coming back anytime soon. And he's earned the trust. Now, for full disclosure, they also used Jordan Howard and pulled him up from the practice squad last week, and he got another 2 touchdowns. So the Detroit Lions didn't actually put out a defensive line. I think they just put a bunch of like stiffs, those tackling dummies, and allowed the Eagles to do whatever they wanted on the ground. But if you just look at percentage of plays on the field and percentage of plays designed for them, Boston Scott and Jordan Howard outsnapped and outcarried Kenneth Gainwell by a tremendous amount. That could have been game script reasoned because they were winning by so much. They didn't need their pass catching back in there because it looks like Kenneth Gainwell is the guy they prefer. So if it's a high scoring game, you might want the PPR running back. But Boston Scott got almost every carry inside the 10-yard line and scored 2 times because of it.
Now, here's a little pro tip also. I've seen this happen both in the Ernest Johnson situation and in the Boston Scott situation. Last year, we saw them use this way. We saw when the running back went down, the top running back, Ernest Johnson, was the guy who started. Demetric Felton obviously wasn't there because he was just drafted. But we've seen that usage before. We've seen it with Boston Scott before. So I thought you made a really smart call last week, and I even thought about saying so, but then I got cut off by Ross probably 7 times. So I wasn't able to speak.
He's good at that. The other running back I would recommend or would put on my ads list, and he is only 49% owned, is Nyheim Hines in Indianapolis. He's always a safe bet to be the pass catching back. Jonathan Taylor, to me, especially with Derrick Henry hurt, is the best running back in football right now. So by saying I'm recommending Nyheim Hines, I don't expect him to be a volume guy. But if you're looking for a bye week fill-in, especially if you're in a PPR league, a guy who's going to get 4 or 5 targets a game can get you 30 to 40 yards in the air with 4 or 5 receptions. That's easily double-digit points right there. So he's a smart bye week fill-in and somebody you can put speculatively on your bench because when it gets into high-scoring games, Carson Wentz will use him as an outlet.
And you said there weren't good people on the waiver wire. You're finding all kinds of gems. Now, listen, Jordan Howard to me is not a preferred pickup because I think game script left Gainwell not involved, and the score is why he had so much output. But also the Detroit Lions, they could have been flagged for having 4 men on the field. I suppose
it felt like it.
It felt like it.
Yeah.
Okay, Carlos Hyde, possible speculative pickup if James Robinson isn't going to be there for this one game, but it looks like he's going to be fine, so I don't recommend it. Meanwhile, I just want to make a comment that Mark Ingram was dealt out of Houston, and I thought, okay, well, maybe there's some room for one of these running backs, David Johnson or Phillip Lindsay. Houston, we have multiple problems. I mean, they are horrible. They remind me
other than Brandon Cooks, I don't know if anybody on that team is ownable right now.
I agree, and even him, I'm not so crazy about. Okay, now listen, I want to check in with the audience. You guys, you aren't leaving enough comments for us. We want to have some arguments. We want to get into it. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Tell us what we're doing right. And then, if you're not sure which one to do, tell us what we're doing right. We have fragile egos sometimes.
That's right. Just tell us we're doing all right.
Exactly. Put your comments below. Remember also, our rankings are available each Wednesday at www.mfsn.tv. That's my rankings, Kasey rankings, Ross's rankings. See which one of us can you roast after that. It's always going to be something. It's like I had Antonio Brown ranked highly, and then I looked at the news and I was like, and he's out for the week.
Yeah.
So we'll do our best.
Dak Prescott we had ranked pretty high too.
Exactly, and he looks like he's going to be out. So we're going to move to wide receivers. This time, it's either going to be me or you. What's it going to be? You want to start?
No, I want you to start.
You want me to start? Okay. Well, I don't know how you'll feel about this, but my top 2 recommendations are New York Giants.
Wow.
Yes. Kadarius Toney, 57% owned. He's a rookie. He's showing a lot of skills. I think if you compare him to the other wide receivers here, he's far and away the best as far as I'm concerned, because he's got that upside. The next guy is Sterling Shepard. Now, Sterling Shepard's value, ironically, is going to get hurt by Kadarius Toney.
Yeah, they both play in the slot.
But he's still he has still put up some pretty big numbers. And meanwhile, the Giants are going to be playing from behind. Sorry, Case. I know you know this. A lot of the time. When I look at these other players, some of them have some maybe greater short-term value, but the long-term value, if you're trying to find somebody who's really good, I would go with the Giants. And meanwhile, Kadarius Toney, to me, does both. So he's my top pickup at wide receiver. What do you say?
I agree. I had him as my top pickup. I don't think there's a lot of difference makers at wide receiver. One guy who I was surprised to see is still under 60% owned. Now it's at 56% as of the airing of the show, is AJ Green in Arizona. The reason I say that isn't because I think he's a huge difference maker. And he certainly, if you watched that Arizona Green Bay game on Thursday night, him not turning around for that last pass cost Arizona the game in a lot of ways. But Kyle Murray likes throwing the ball to him, and he's a volume play. If he's going to get that many targets, he's going to be worth owning. And so AJ Green, I would definitely put on there. And Brandon Ayuk has started to make his presence again. He was a kind of a preseason favorite. And then all of a sudden Deebo Samuel sort of came in and said, no, I'm going to be the alpha receiver. And Brandon Ayuk was getting kind of maligned in the press for a lack of professionalism or a lack of effort or what have you. But the last couple of weeks, he seems to be game scripted a little bit more. We've seen how talented he was at the end of 2020. So that's certainly somebody you can pick up if he's available and hope that he regains that form and that trust in Jimmy Garoppolo, who seems to be the starter going forward in San Francisco.
Always a great vote of confidence when you hear the phrase, he seems to be the starter. Maybe not for long.
Well, it was interesting. Did you see Jimmy Garoppolo? I don't think he had a passing touchdown, but he ran 2 in. So he was trying to do his best to be Trey Lance, maybe as a way to avoid the
you don't need Trey Lance. I'm
putting in Trey Lance. Well, I can run in. You don't need him. So
now let me ask you a question. What about Randall Cobb? Speaking of tooting your own horn.
Yes, I did pick him.
This?
But if you look, he had 2 touchdowns Thursday night. And so from a pure touchdown perspective, it was great. I think he only had 15 total yards receiving, though.
That's 15.
So not 50, 15.
Yes.
And so while he scored a fair amount, Devontae Adams, I believe, was just activated off the COVID list this week. So he will be back. And in that respect, I expect Randall Cobb to return to his position of irrelevance from a fantasy perspective. I think he might be used in that slot on short yardage situations, but he's not the same receiver of 10 years ago who can take a 4-yard slant or 8-yard cross and break 2 tackles and be gone. I think he's going to be limited in terms of his effectiveness, and I don't think you can trust him as a day in, day out player.
All right, now I'm going to give you 4 names, and I want you to pick out the one you like most.
The one I like most. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Devontae Parker. Laviska Shenault.
Oh, not him.
Henry Ruggs or Elijah Moore.
Ooh. I think if they're all healthy, probably Devontae Parker. Laviska Shenault has lost targets to somebody named Jamal Agnew in Jacksonville, who had 12 targets.
Spiro Agnew.
Right. Joke from junior high, if you rearrange the words, the name Spiro Agnew, it spells grow a penis, but that's completely unrelated to football. But so Laviska Shenault isn't even getting onto the field as much as people thought he was, and they thought he was going to be the number 2 wide receiver out there. Right now, he's number 4, I believe. Henry Ruggs is a deep threat option, but a deep threat only. He wants to be Tyreek Hill, but he's not as good, and he doesn't have Patrick Mahomes throwing to him. So I don't trust him very much. I prefer guys who get a target share. And Elijah Moore is the Jets, and Jamison Crowder. He and Jamison Crowder kind of play the same position, so I worry about the competition there. So I think Devontae Parker of all of those would be the one I would trust the most, but I don't necessarily want to rely on any of them.
I think that's fair. I think Devontae Parker, though, is a decent pickup because with Tua back...
I agree he's a decent pickup. I just don't want to rely on him.
No, I agree. But I will say this. Listen, part of the game is about speculation. You could pick up Elijah Moore, who plays on Thursday, and just see how he does. If he does well, then maybe you got somebody who's a bench stash. If he doesn't do well, you cut bait, you move on.
Well, I think from a dynasty perspective, Elijah Moore probably has the most value of all of them. And so we're talking redraft value, I'm assuming, when you
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And meanwhile, if we're talking dynasty, get Kadarius Toney and don't think about Elijah Moore. They're both, have some value, but Kadarius Toney is the one to do. Okay, we're going to move on to our favorite category, tight ends. Or as we know it, the corpses. They're so bad. However, there are some that
but
are
I get to go
kinda...
first this time, so hopefully I'll eliminate all the one. I'll just name 2 and let you name the rest.
All right.
The first, because I know you have a longer list than I do. The first I'm going to say is Dan Arnold in Jacksonville. He was traded from Carolina, I believe, earlier in the year because everybody was in love with the Darnold to Arnold throw. But Trevor Lawrence seems to like him, seems to trust him. He gets a fair amount of targets. And he gets between 30 and 50 yards pretty regularly each game. And at the tight end position at this late in the season or this stage in the season, if you're going to get 4 receptions for 50 yards out of your tight end, I think that's pretty pickup good. Worthy and even play worthy at times, because you look at the tight end position and
listen, you can play anybody at tight end and it's play worthy.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah. Darren Waller's hurt. Travis Kelce has been relatively disappointing this year. He's had a couple good games. Dalton Schultz was great for a while, but he's laid a dud. He laid a dud last night and hasn't been all that great. Tyler is Knox, right?
No, Dawson Knox.
Dawson Knox has been hurt. He broke his hand and had surgery. He's supposed to be coming back, but who knows when. So Dan Arnold, and the other one I'll name is Tyler Conklin in Minnesota. I know we've said him a couple times. He's not a world beater. He's not going to be the difference in your league, but as tight ends go, he's palatable.
That's true. Now, meanwhile, Dan Arnold, wasn't he the husband on Roseanne? Nobody's saying
was it Dan?
About it. Was Dan, and their last name was Arnold. Nobody's saying.
I know the Arnold part. I didn't know the last name.
That's right. It was Dan. I remember because, Now, listen, Jared Cook, 58% owned, totally serviceable tight end. But the guy that I would be going after. Oh,
I forgot to name him. I think you're going to name him now.
If you're going to be going after someone, is Pat Freiermuth.
Freiermuth. Yep. The rookie from Penn State.
Yeah. He was the second tight end in the draft, and he's got a lot of talent. He works in a system that should be able to utilize him. The Steelers are very smart that way. And Ben Roethlisberger is going to dump off a lot of passes. He's only 10% owned. He's my top tight end grab. I think he has the plausible upside to be much better than these other guys. Here's another guy, though. I'm not saying I would recommend him. This is actually more about confusion about the actual game. What are the Browns doing with David Njoku? This guy is good. He's the best tight end on there, and they just don't use him. It's not enough anyway. Very strange. All right, let's move to defenses, Kasey. Little plug again for clicking subscribe, ringing the bell for notifications. Hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below. And also that our rankings are available each Wednesday at www.mfsn.tv. Let's do defenses. Would you like me to go first this time?
It's up to, I will let you have the floor.
You know what? I'm going to go first. I'll tell you why. Because this is a team that I scooped up a week early in both leagues. New Orleans, one of the top defenses in the league, got cut because they were on bye. sometimes you want to watch out for that, especially if you just have a bench spot that you're not crazy about. Scoop them up. And meanwhile, they're playing Atlanta. Atlanta's a pretty easy play. Calvin Ridley, our thoughts go out to him. There's obviously a lot going on with him. We're both therapists, so we can really be empathic to him about it. It's a scary thing, but it's also kind of I think a good thing.
I'm impressed. I really am that he's willing to do this. So,
well, it's becoming more and more the kind of thing where players are learning to take care of themselves and say, you know what, this is actually too much. And if you think about it, fans can be pretty rough on players, and that's a lot of pressure being out there. And so I really wish him all the best. It changes the whole scene in Atlanta. The New Orleans matchup becomes juicier. It already was pretty good. I have them at the top of my list. There are a couple other teams, but I'll let you scoop some up.
Well, the top one on my list this week, I agree with you. New Orleans is a great play and has been great. Look what they were able to do last night against Tom Brady to win that game. Is New England. I just think they're playing decent defense. They're going against Carolina this week. Sam Darnold, I believe, was knocked out with a concussion. He's still in the protocol, so we don't know if he's going to be playing next week. They don't have a lot going on that's going right in Carolina. They have DJ Moore, and that's pretty much it. Robbie Anderson's been a disappointment. Chuba Hubbard played well last week, but with the backup quarterback, they're going to be able to put 7 or 8 in the box every time and say, go ahead and beat us. And so I think New England is a great play. The other one who has impressed me, and I hate picking them as a Giants fan, the Dallas Cowboys have impressed me as a team as a whole. And even on defense, they have Trayvon Diggs, who is just intercepting everything that's thrown in his direction. Their turnovers, Micah Parsons, I'm a Penn State guy in a lot of ways, living here in Central PA. So I'm a big Micah Parsons fan. He's from Harrisburg. He's proven to be the real deal at linebacker for Dallas. And they're going up against Denver. Denver's a better team than many other teams, but Teddy Bridgewater is not known for getting into shootouts. He's more of a dink and dunk passer. Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon are good running backs, but you can game script against them. So I like the Dallas Cowboys this week too.
It's a great pick. I'm just going to add a couple others. Miami, I never feel super comfortable starting Miami, but they are playing at home against Houston. Yeah. Houston has just been dreadful. And another team that I don't mind playing, kind of plug and play, is the Las Vegas Raiders against your Giants. I don't love starting them on the road, but
anybody against my Giants.
It's a decent enough start. I mean, I think all 4 of the ones we mentioned before that I would put ahead, but there you go. Okay, now let's get it over with. Kicker. Who do you got? Does it matter?
It doesn't matter. How about Daniel Carlson against my Giants, the Vegas kicker? He's only 27% owned. I'll name Chris Boswell for Pittsburgh going against Chicago. That's another one who could put up some numbers. And then after that, it's whomever you would like. I think that's not.
Listen, when you say Vegas kicker, I think we're playing poker. Just not Daniel Carlson, but he is probably the top pickup. Mason Crosby also at Kansas City. Kansas City's defense is it's really bad. I mean, it makes me wonder what Andy Reid's doing over there, or just maybe the personnel. I don't know, but they're just certainly not looking good. But when it comes to kicker, I find don't chase after the points. Just play somebody. Don't think twice about it as much. If you've got a kicker who can kick 50-yarders and things like that, that helps because they can pile up the points fast. I picked up Greg Joseph on the Vikings. I'm just going to stick with him for the rest of the year because he's past the bye, and I'm just not going to think about it anymore. Now, Case, since we have a little bit of extra time here, let's talk about some of the biggest disappointments, guys that were ready to cut bait on, some of the biggest surprises. We can talk about it in any format you want. I'm just curious what your take is on things at this point this year. What's sticking out to you?
Well, hell, what's sticking out to me are the first round picks. If you think about it, who are the top 5 or 6 picks this year? Maybe the entire first round. Not a lot of them have been holding up their value. I mean, Derrick Henry was awesome for 8 weeks, but he might be gone the second half of the season. Dalvin Cook has been very, very mediocre at best. Some people put Saquon Barkley up high. He's missed the past 3 or 4 weeks and hasn't produced before that. Patrick Mahomes has been a bit of a disappointment considering people when you take a quarterback in the first round, you're hoping for, vintage Peyton Manning 50 touchdown seasons, 45 touchdown seasons, which we all thought Patrick Mahomes was capable of. He hasn't really produced at that level. Calvin Ridley was a first-round pick or second-round pick in some leagues, and obviously, as our heart goes out to him, he hasn't returned value on that. Antonio Gibson hasn't returned value. Even Travis Kelce, to me, while he's still arguably the best tight end, and he may be the top-ranked fantasy tight end, I'm not sure, but he's not returning first or second-round value on his picks either. So I think the overwhelming theme is those top 2 rounds really, on the whole, haven't been spectacular.
It really is true. So I pulled up the draft results from our MFSN.
I didn't even mention Christian McCaffrey, by the way.
Right. I pulled up the draft results from our MFSN league. And by the way, I did not feel comfortable drafting Christian McCaffrey number 1. Don't get me wrong. I also didn't feel comfortable not drafting him number 1.
You and I both listed him as 3rd or 4th.
But I didn't have him number 1. I had Derrick Henry as number 1. He has certainly proven to be so far. And he also had been durable. So we didn't see this coming. But if you read this list, it really is true. We start to read it, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to read it, and you tell me when you hear a name that has either overachieved or met the standards that we would hope for at that pick. Christian McCaffrey, obviously not. Dalvin Cook, nope. Alvin Kamara, he's been fine, but he hasn't been at that level.
He's a volume guy. He hasn't gotten in the end zone much, but his PPR points keep him relevant.
He scored more touchdowns in one game last season than he has even come close to this season. Patrick Mahomes has been a disappointment. Here's a guy that I think certainly has lived up to his draft status, is Ezekiel Elliott. People didn't talk about him that much.
Yeah, I think Ezekiel Elliott, Jonathan Taylor, and Aaron Jones have probably been the 3 best fantasy running backs so far this year.
I think so. And Ezekiel Elliott went 5, and Aaron Jones went 12. I got Jonathan Taylor with the 16th pick. I was thrilled about it. I passed up on a couple players. In fact, I didn't take Nick Chubb because I took Travis Kelce. And then I was like, well, I can get a good guy on the other end. But Jonathan Taylor was beyond what I could have expected.
Yeah.
It really kept me afloat. On the wide receiver side, Tyreek Hill, maybe a slight disappointment, but he's been pretty solid, I would say. Kelce has been a disappointment, but solid enough. Devontae Adams is a first-round pick who lived up to it.
And I'm glad I took him with my first pick.
Nick Chubb has proved to be a bit of a disappointment. Antonio Gibson, huge bust so far.
Huge bust.
Then we got Austin Eckler.
He's been pretty good.
He's been pretty good. At that pick, that's a pretty good pick. And that was your pick, actually.
Yep.
Saquon Barkley, I was like, no way. Too much injury risk. It was like Christian McCaffrey, but not
the upside.
Not as much upside. Then you got Jonathan Taylor has been good. Darren Waller has been a bust in multiple ways. DeAndre Hopkins, not that good. Adam Thielen, he's had a down year. Stephon Diggs, I was not that high on. Now, let me own this though. I wasn't that high on him, but not for the right reason. It ended up being that he hasn't done well, I think, just because Josh Allen has become such a good quarterback that he spreads the ball around.
He doesn't rely on Stephon Diggs as much.
He just doesn't rely on him as much. Emmanuel
Sanders has been great for them. Dawson Knox has been great for them. Cole Beasley has been great for them. So he's turned their entire passing offense into fantasy relevance. So
yeah. So look, I'm just combing through. Look, you can get in our draft, Josh Allen went in round 3. The guy who took Patrick Mahomes in round 1, I'm not picking on him. I'm not even saying it was necessarily a bad pick, but you're right. The problem is when you take a quarterback that early, you have got to hope that they are that much more dominant over a guy who's going in the 3rd round, or else you paid too much. Now, let me give you a little bit of credit here, extra credit, because I've given you some credit today, but Darrell Henderson in round 3, that's proved to be pretty good. I picked Josh Jacobs 2 picks before. If I could reverse it now, it's not even close. Nice job.
Yeah, that was somebody I was targeting. Actually, if I didn't take Devontae Adams with my first pick, I was probably going to take Eckler there, Taylor or Henderson as the wraparound. When Cam Akers got hurt, I just love that Chargers offense. I mean, not when was it Cam Akers there?
What's that?
No, I mean that Rams offense. I'm sorry.
Oh, Rams.
When Cam Akers got hurt, I just thought that was when Matt Stafford went there, I just thought it was a great spot for running back. So I thought Darrell Henderson was going to have success. It
was a very smart pick. I mean, Josh Jacobs hasn't been terrible, but he has not returned value there, and that's the name of the game. So, guys, we're going to wrap this up, but the key here when you're doing these drafts, just try to avoid the bus. It's hard to do. I mean, fantasy football, it is a war of attrition, and you've got to stay on the wire. Go ahead, Case. What were we going to say?
I was just going to say, and don't stick with somebody just because of the name value. I mean, if you think of the guys we named, they're the first round are all big name players. And I would say 5 or 6 of them shouldn't be if they're not injured, still shouldn't be everyday starters for you right now. Like if you have Dalvin Cook, yeah, you're probably stuck plugging him in and week out because you probably don't have enough depth behind him. But if you have one of these other guys we're talking about, these lower end guys, the Boston Scotts, the Ernest Johnsons, who are fantasy relevant week to week, they might be better than Dalvin Cook, and you have to be willing to consider that. Or if you can find somebody in your league who still values the name, trade. Like I can't stress enough the power of making a good trade where you can increase your depth and spread the wealth for your scoring on your team.
Great point. Once again, I hope that we've hooked you up with some of the best picks on the waiver wire. You got to get your claims in soon. Most leagues are claiming on Tuesday night into Wednesday. Because we want to make sure we let the Monday night game go and see what happens there. Get your claims in, write your comments. We're happy to help you out and get you the best picks possible. Tune in again next week, the usual time, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, 5:45 p.m. Pacific. Check in with comments, click like, hit subscribe, yada, 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 yada. I don't even know how to say yada, yada, yada anymore. Oh my God, we're out of gas. Our rankings also available each Wednesday at www.mfsn.tv. And thank you, Kasey, Vlad to the Bone Scheinfeld, for carrying the load with me tonight. We were without Ross the Boss and Jim Ginocchio, who is often here with us. You did the job. Nice job, man.
You too. Well done.
Hey everyone, Mustache Stars here for Killcliff CBD. The best and tastiest way to get CBD into your body is with Killcliff CBD drinks. 125 milligrams of broad spectrum hemp extract yields 25 milligrams of CBD. And it's more than gummies, tinctures, or lotions. Life just got better with Killcliff CBD. And it makes that itch on my face go away. Real science, killer taste, own it. Go to killcliff.com.